Okay, let's start with something that, well, it honestly sounds like something out of a really bad movie script. Imagine this. You're on a brand new top-of-the-line airliner, takeoff is smooth,
Mm.
you're climbing, everything feels completely normal. And then, just seconds after the wheels leave the ground, boom, both engines just
Okja.
stop. Not sputtering, not winding down, just off instantly. It's terrifying just to think about. And that specific, shocking detail, that's where we're focusing our deep dive today. We're going through the source material on the terrible Air India Flight 171 crash back on June 12th, 2025. Our job here really is to cut through all the noise, get down to the basic facts, look at what the investigators actually found in the early days, especially about that dual engine failure.
That's right. We're talking about Flight AI 171, a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. It was meant to fly from Ahmedabad all the way to London Gatwick. And what makes this so immediately gripping, and frankly, pretty disturbing, is that very first preliminary finding from India's AAIB, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. They found that the fuel control switches for both engines moved from the RON position to cut off just seconds after liftoff. Now, for anyone who knows aviation, moving those switches took Chupar off. That's how you shut an engine down deliberately. It's a positive action. Seeing that happen to both engines right after rotation, well, it immediately points to two possibilities, and honestly, they're both pretty catastrophic. Either you've got just an unbelievable, unprecedented mistake by the crew,
Yeah.
or you're looking at a deeply concerning flaw in the plane's design or equipment. A brand new plane, remember?
Yeah, that technical piece is obviously central. But before we get deeper into that, we have to acknowledge the sheer human cost here. The location, too. Sources say the plane came down moments after takeoff, right near a hostile block. Part of a medical college, I think, in the Magani area of Ahmedabad.
Yes. And that location, being so close to buildings, just amplified the tragedy. It wasn't just an aircraft accident. It hit the community hard.
The numbers are just awful. 242 people on the plane, 230 passengers, 12 crew.
And only one survivor from the aircraft itself. So that's 241 people lost on board.
But it didn't stop there, did it? Because of where it crashed.
Exactly. The impact near those buildings meant people on the ground were killed too. Reports vary slightly, but hover around 19, maybe more, killed by the impact or the fire and debris that followed. It was just a massive scale disaster. And India's investigation body, the AAIB, they were under intense global scrutiny from day one to figure this out.
Okay, let's really spend some time on that core technical mystery now. The AAIB's initial report, it flat out stated, fuel control switches, both engines, moved from run to cutoff. Now, for our listeners who follow aviation closely, maybe walk us through that. What does moving that switch to cutoff do inside the engine? And where are these switches? Like, are they easy to knock accidentally?
Right. Good question. That's really the heart of the technical puzzle. Moving that switch, it's basically an electromechanical command. It signals the engine's computer, the FADEC, right?
Yeah.
And the FADEC then closes the main fuel valve. Simple as that. Shuts off the fuel supply, starves the engine. You do that, thrust is gone in seconds. It is the engine's off switch.
Soft switch, got it.
And where are they? In the 787, they're typically up on the overhead panel. So above the pilot's heads, grouped with other system controls. Crucially, they're designed not to be moved by accident. Often they have little guards, or you have to lift to move them. There's a definite click or detent. This isn't, like a coffee cup holder button you might bump. It takes a deliberate reach, a specific action.
A deliberate reach.
Okay. Which makes the idea of both moving unintentionally at the exact same critical moment. Well, it's incredibly unlikely from a purely accidental standpoint.
Yeah.
Highly suspect.
So if it takes a deliberate action, and it happened seconds into the climb-out, the most critical phase.
Well, the AAIB immediately started wider safety checks focusing on pilot training records. Doesn't that kind of signal they suspect human error? Are they looking more at the people than the plane right now?
Well, that's a really fair point. But you have to see it from the investigation perspective. With a dual-engine failure like this, especially if it looks like it was triggered by a control input, you have to check the human factor first, thoroughly. Even if the scenario seems bizarre, it's just standard procedure. You audit the training, the procedures, the crew's history. That's why the regulator moves so fast on looking at pilot training logs and the flight schools.
Okay, standard procedure. But, and this is important, the AAIB itself has been very, very careful in its language. They confirmed the switches moved, fact, but why they moved, officially, undetermined. They haven't ruled anything out. If they exhaust the human element investigation, they have to pivot hard towards a system solve.
Right. Which brings us back to the Dreamliner itself. It's known for its advanced electrical systems, isn't it?
Absolutely. Very reliant on fly-by-wire and extensive electrical networks.
So what kind of mechanical or maybe electrical failure could possibly make those switches way up on the overhead panel move to see off, both of them, at the same time?
That's the nightmare scenario for the engineers, I think. The most plausible, though still maybe unlikely, theory involves some kind of major electrical fault. You know, the 787 powers so much electrically that used to be pneumatic, run by engine bleed air. If you had a massive short circuit, maybe a power surge, or some kind of cascading failure in the electrical bus system that feeds power to that overhead panel, it's theoretically possible, I suppose, that it could send a false command. Or maybe cause the switch mechanism itself to fail into the cutoff position. It's a long shot, maybe, but it has to be looked at.
And didn't the Dreamliner have some electrical issues early in its service life? Battery problems?
It did, not fatal, but significant issues with its lithium-ion batteries and electrical architecture early on, required major redesigns and fixes. So yes, investigators will be meticulously tracing every wire, every connection related to those fuel switches. It's painstaking work.
And all of this is happening under just immense pressure, right? Politically, emotionally. It's quite concerning that our sources mention this, that family members of the crew actually raised concerns, worries about the investigation potentially being manipulated.
Yes, that adds another layer of difficulty. It's an incredibly sensitive environment.
The government has flatly denied any manipulation, made formal statements,
Yeah.
but the fact that those concerns even exist, it shows a lack of trust, doesn't it?
It really does. When the physical evidence, those switches moving, points to something so fundamentally wrong, so seemingly inexplicable, the integrity of the investigation itself becomes critical. People need to trust the process.
Especially as the initial focus feels like it's leaning towards the pilots.
Exactly. If the investigators are digging deep into training records, the families might naturally worry that a conclusion is being reached prematurely. They want absolute certainty that a complex system's failure, maybe something specific to the 787's electrical design, isn't being missed or, worse, ignored to find a simpler human cause.
So the AAIB has a huge challenge.
Oh, absolutely. They need evidence that is crystal clear, conclusive, something that can overcome any perception of external pressure and directly address why those switches moved. The credibility of Indian aviation and, frankly, global confidence in this aircraft hinges on it.
Let's zoom out a bit.
Yeah.
The impact here is systemic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Largely because of the plane involved. This is a huge deal in aviation, the Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner. It's been the poster child for modern air travel for what, over a decade now? And this is its first fatal crash in regular commercial service.
That's a hugely significant point, yes. The 787 isn't just another jetliner. It's built differently, mostly composites, not aluminum. It uses fundamentally different systems architecture. It was meant to be the leap forward in safety and efficiency. Its safety record, because it was so revolutionary, has always been under a microscope.
Yeah.
So the fact that its first fatal accident involves such a basic, catastrophic failure, losing all engine power right after takeoff, something multiple redundancies are supposed to prevent, well, it instantly casts a shadow. It connects this specific awful event in Ahmedabad to the safety perception of every single Dreamliner flying globally. Every airline operating 787s is watching this investigation like a hawk.
And the immediate reaction in India, regulator-wise. We talked about the pilot training focus, but what else are they doing?
Well, beyond scrutinizing the pilot records and flight school compliance, the sources suggest we're looking at potentially major changes down the line. This crash is likely acting as a catalyst, a forcing function for systemic improvements. We're probably going to see increased government oversight, definitely more rigorous safety audits of aircraft, especially focusing on those electrical systems and control mechanisms we talked about.
And emergency response, too, I imagine, given the crash site.
Yes, definitely. Improvements to emergency response capabilities. Think about it crashing near that hostel. Regulations around disaster preparedness, particularly for areas under flight paths near airports, will almost certainly be reviewed and likely strengthened. They're not just investigating the switches, they're looking at the whole aviation ecosystem.
Makes sense. But even with all those vital systemic checks, there's the inevitable impact on passengers, on public confidence. You can quote safety statistics all day long, and air travel is incredibly safe, statistically. But when people see a modern jet fail like this, so suddenly, so catastrophically, it shakes confidence, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That trust is hard-won and easily damaged. Regaining it fully depends almost entirely on the AIB's final report. It needs to be transparent, clear, and definitive. If the finding leaves ambiguity, especially that gray area between human error and a hidden system flaw, That ambiguity will hang over the Dreamliner for a long, long time.
Yeah, seeing a flagship plane suffer a total power loss like that, it just undermines that core belief in redundant safety systems.
Precisely. The immediate reaction is often to look at procedures, the human element, because it's sometimes easier to grasp, but the pressure must stay on understanding the machine factor just as intensely.
So where does the investigation stand right now? What are the next steps?
Well, the entire aviation world is basically holding its breath, waiting for one thing: the final detailed report from the AAIB. Until that's published, the official cause is undetermined. That cloud of uncertainty just hangs there.
And in the meantime, the immediate difficult work continues on the ground.
Oh, absolutely. The process of identifying victims, given the severity of the crash, it relies heavily on DNA testing for most families. It's a slow, painstaking, and emotionally brutal task. Just highlights the violence of the impact.
And what about other 787s flying in India? Are they looking closer at the rest of the fleet?
Sources indicate that's definitely being watched closely. There are signs that wider, potentially mandatory inspections of other 787s in India might be launched or maybe already are underway quietly. It suggests the regulators are indeed concerned about potential equipment issues, running that check in parallel with the pilot training audits.
So it feels like we're stuck at this really critical point. We know what happened. Both engine fuel switches went to CU at OFAF right after takeoff. Simple fact. But the why? That's the huge unknown. Was it a pilot action, deliberate, mistaken, incapacitated? Or was it some hidden gremlin in the machine, some complex electrical fault that somehow bypassed all the safety layers? That's the core tension, isn't it?
It really is. And this whole investigation forces a tough question about modern aviation safety. Our sources point towards expected regulatory changes, better oversight, stricter audits, covering both pilot procedures and aircraft design safety. So, thinking about the B7878 late fleet worldwide moving forward, here's something for you, the listener, to really mull over. Which specific area of safety focus is ultimately going to be more critical? Is it doubling down on pilot training, ensuring procedural perfection? Or is it a fundamental deep dive, maybe even an overhaul, of the aircraft's complex electrical systems and fail-safes? Which line of defense needs the most reinforcement to prevent this kind of unthinkable failure from ever happening again?
That's a really vital question. We strongly encourage you to keep following the story, especially any news about wider 787 fleet inspections. That final AAID report, when it comes, it's going to be incredibly important for how we view and trust aviation technology going forward. We'll certainly be tracking every development.